I want to see it from James Chen point of view. James does a great conversation about this as well. Same topic, the exact same topic.
The beta that allows them to keep playing the beta, obviously without the online features and stuff, because it can't communicate with the server and such. But people are still able to access everything that was on the beta, including the training mode, the original 8 characters, versus mode, etc., etc. And so a lot of people have been using this beta for and playing on this beta quite some time. Excuse me, as I said, a little bit sick here. But Momochi, I think it was like in an interview, I'm not sure if it was a video interview or a text interview, but Giuna tweeted out that Momochi highlighted a quote. He highlighted a quote from Momochi stating that players who are known to be players using the Street Fighter 6 crack and playing right now should be banned from the CPT season because it is cheating. This has actually kind of raised a lot of drama and discussions and debates in the FGC social media verse out there, and you know, people have asked my opinion, and I've said that I just don't think it's something that is easily answered in, you know, tweets. And so I didn't want to address the whole thing in tweets over here, so I figured I'd talk about it on stream and on video at this point in time. So it's a very interesting situation, right? Because obviously, as we've seen from the demo that was released this past weekend after the Street Fighter 6 showcase, which we will talk about in just a little bit, and in case you guys want to see me go over the showcase, keep an eye out for on YouTube for tomorrow, because that should be out. The cracked version is not the final version, obviously. There have already been changes to Ryu and Luke that people have found now, albeit they are balance changes and are probably relatively minor to the general strategy. And so yeah, you can always see it. You can see a lot of people talking about it in the chat already. Some people are like, yes, absolutely ban them, they're cheating. A lot of people are like, whatever, it doesn't even matter because it's going to be different anyway, whatever, etc., etc. Yeah, I do agree largely with Nutacon that it's too hard to enforce kind of thing, and that's probably one of the big things here. But, you know, what's my stance on this? What do I think should happen at this point? Now, this is the trickiest part, is that, you know, there's so many facets of this. This is why I didn't want to discuss it on Twitter, because there's so many facets. Some people have said, how is this any different than before, when Japan used to get early releases of the game and every place else had to wait like a month or even year? Like Tekken 7 has been available in Japan forever before Americans and Europeans could get their hands on it. Street Fighter 4 would always come out in Japan first, etc., etc. How is that any different? And at least on the crack, everybody can get access to it. Like, you can't make that comparison, okay? That comparison is completely...
That's exactly right.
I mean, there's just no point making this comparison. One, it's like literally there's one that, you know, the dev...
All right, let's start with that. We'll start with that real quick. This is an argument that I have heard before. Just because previous crack betas from previous entries have existed, they should allow this one to exist. And Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5 have been on arcades accessible to just the Japanese player, so they had access to an early version of the game. Why is this any different? It is different because it's a different time. That cannot be that cannot be overlooked. Fighting games were much smaller back then, so anything they could to build the player base and build the market base was free. So it's really important that we recognize that times have changed, and not only that, there's $1 million on the line. But if we go past the money, video games have changed drastically since when that era was around. Now, it's just not comparable. Now it's a whole new business, a whole new way of life. It's totally different. And people that are bringing up that argument are overlooking the most important component, which is, was that unfair for them? Yes, it was. That doesn't, just because it was unfair back then doesn't mean it should be accepted now. If you're acknowledging that it was unfair back then you should acknowledge that it should have been banned back then too, which means that your argument still applies to today. That you think that if it should be banned back then it should be banned back today. It just means that Capcom was wrong for doing it in the first place, but at the same time, that was the time period, and that was considered acceptable, and that was also the transition out of the arcade scene. So times were different back then. Now it's online gaming, and anyone that can get access to these games when they're asked not to is clearly a case of violating integrity. But again, they still should have known better. Lou, you're asking if there were if they were on arcades, wouldn't that mean that they were officially made available for players in Japan? Yes, you are right. And that's why I'm talking about it's a different time. Guess what is not officially available in Japan on arcades? Street Fighter 6. Times have changed. It's not the same time anymore. These games are not, one of the things that we're failing to recognize, or at least the community is failing to recognize, is that the arcade scene is virtually gone. It's not completely dead. They're still there, but it does not have the sway on developers or market, for that matter, anymore. The world has gotten bigger, and fighting games have grown much larger. So we need to stop thinking in a little box and look at the bigger picture.
Does not want you to do. And the other one is clearly something the dev was okay with, right? Like, if the publisher is releasing the game, then that's just how it works. Now, was it an unfair advantage to Japan? Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. That was also Street Fighter 4 way the hell back, like 10 years ago. And if you notice something for Street Fighter 5, they haven't done that at all. In fact, most fighting game companies have not done this. Strive has come out universally everywhere for everyone at the same time. KOF 15 came out universally for everyone, everywhere at the same time. And every version of Street Fighter 5 has come out everywhere for everyone at the same time. Look, the devs are clearly aware of what's going on, and that the early versions were, of course, an advantage, and they're not doing it anymore. So there's no point to have this discussion. And in fact, I would say that these days, Momochi would actually be one of the players to be like, oh yeah, that was totally unfair for us. They shouldn't do that either. Like, Momochi's not like, ha ha ha, we got away with one a long time ago. Like, clearly, Momochi would probably say the same thing today. Yes, you're right. We shouldn't be getting copies earlier than anyone else, because that sucks. Yeah, and so we're talking a little bit more on the effects of the piracy here and the cracked version, but not just that. Okay, obviously this is illegal, right? Like, it's illegal. Like, we're not supposed to be using the crack, right? This is clearly something that the developers didn't want. In fact, my guess is that Beta 2 probably would have had some different characters than Beta 1 if that first crack hadn't occurred. After that first crack occurred, you saw that there were basically no balance changes in the beta number 2. And that's because at this point in time, Capcom's probably like, well, we don't want to update anything. We don't want to give away anything anymore, right? And so at this point, they were just going to give us a repeat of what it was before. We still have no word on any sort of open beta to test matchmaking. And I wonder if this is one of the reasons, because the crack came out here. And saying like, oh, I don't even know what that means. Mochi is just mad Japanese players would get banned way faster. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't see why anybody in Japan would get banned faster than anybody else. If he was mad about that, then
I don't know what that guy's trying to say. I genuinely don't understand what he's saying there.
But in any case, no, there are definitely some FGC players doing the cracking. Using the crack, as we should say. No. So what Momochi is not really worried about, I don't think, is the implications of just piracy. Like, you bad people, piracy, bad people. Like, I don't think that's what the issue is. I think the issue is that when Capcom at Capcom Cup this year announced that the prize pool was going to be $2 million and the first prize was going to be $1 million, I think a lot of people were kind of hoping that this was this really cool precedent and like Capcom would just all of a sudden like be able to maintain this year after year after year, right? Like they just said, here's $1 million, and we're like, shit, is Street Fighter 6 gonna be this way? However, the issue is that since then the language has changed pretty drastically. And what Capcom seems to keep saying is, and in celebration of the first year, the prize pool for this CPT will be $1 million to first place. Which means it sounds like it could be $1 million for this first year, and then never again. At least unless they can get the budget, etc., etc. So, my original stance on the crack was, who cares, right? Like, because you know what? People had the Street Fighter V crack early on. Some players definitely benefited from that with very early success. That was parlayed, some of them parlayed it into sponsorships and such. But that was also back then when sponsorships were kind of like being thrown out like crazy, right? Like we actually had like a lot of sponsorships in the FGC. This year we just basically seem to be having none, and every esports org seems to be shutting down, right? So the whole entire thing is that after a few good months, I don't think the crack mattered in Street Fighter V. Obviously, there's a lot of characters that weren't in the Street Fighter crack, the Street Fighter V crack. And then a lot of the best players are just going to be the best players anyway. You know, you're not going to have access to the other entire 10 characters in the beta. So you have to learn how to fight those characters the same way you're going to have to learn as everybody else is learning how to fight them. There's going to be balance changes that are going to change the way the character plays a little bit. So that's also going to affect it as well, etc., etc. However, the issue now, however, is the people with the crack. If this is, we don't know how CPT is going to be structured, but let's say EVO is an instant qualifier. Let's say they determine CEO is going to be an instant qualifier to Capcom Cup. Even if they're not instant qualifiers and you get a ton of points for getting you into Capcom Cup, clearly having and playing the crack these past half a year is a huge advantage. Right? And so it's going to help them get into Capcom Cup a lot easier. It's going to help them at least get into that position to win $1 million. Now, obviously, if they're not very good in the end, fundamentally, they're not going to win Capcom Cup, clearly. I mean, there are some good players that we know have access to the crack. They could definitely benefit from it greatly, but it probably won't affect the results too badly, except for the fact that it may rob the opportunity away from some people who chose not to play on the crack, right? I mean, we saw in the second beta, there were a lot of online tournaments, and a lot of the players that have been playing on the crack were clearly already using strategies that a lot of us hadn't thought of, and using kind of just kind of understanding the system mechanics and finding things that stuff with the system mechanics that a lot of us would not have have found if we didn't have access to it.
That's been exciting to watch, to be honest. To be entirely honest, that's been incredibly exciting to watch.
And see, that's the thing. Brother Cool says you're trolling yourself if you're a potential winner of CPT and you're not playing the crack. I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of people who aren't playing the crack because, because of fear of things like bans and such. I especially imagine that no one in Japan would be using it. Japan culture is very, very different out there. And Japan's not, they're not as heavy in PC gaming. Japan has always been a console-oriented country as for their gaming and stuff. Sure, a lot of their fighting game players are on PC now, but also they have a lot more to lose, being part of JESPA, which is literally like their licenses are handed out by Capcom, right? Like there's a lot more at stake for Japan than there is for US, right? So the biggest issue is that there's no way to prove, right? Outside of the few people who are like, hell yeah, I'm playing the crack. What are you gonna do about it? Right? Like those people, okay, maybe we can do something with them. But then at that point, there's just gonna be so many people who have been playing the crack that aren't saying anything. And there's really no way to enforce this, right? There's really no way to enforce this.
So there's that argument again. There's no way to enforce this. Don't push your luck. Don't push your luck. If Capcom doesn't want people on PC to have access to it, they will stop doing it. If it becomes too much of a hindrance, too much of a hassle, they will. Additionally, there was a argument, not an argument, but a point that he made about how it's no way to prove it. That is true. You can't really prove it. You can always have a gut feeling, oh, that guy's definitely practiced the crack. All these other things. There's no real way to prove it unless Capcom's willing to violate privacy, which is against the law, so they can't do that. Additionally, I don't think anyone wants that either. No one wants that kind of enforcement to that extent. So we're at an impasse. So what do we do? It's simple. Everyone has to honor it. It's called integrity. Competitions are built on integrity. If you don't have integrity in your competitions, no one's going to take it seriously then. So the fact that the rule exists is a big impact. It's a lot bigger than people realize. This focus on enforcement is so absurd. Because yeah, there are going to be bad apples that break the rules, but you know what's going to happen? Some people might know and may want to rat them out. Someone might screw up on their stream and reveal they have the beta. I don't care so much that someone who is an average person has access to the crack beta. I don't care so much about that. I care about professionals who compete. Guess what? You're competing to be the best in the world. So that holds something. And we're going to say that they don't have integrity is a big problem.
And yeah, so I mean, a lot of people are talking about this. The whole ban people to make them not use it mentality doesn't work in other cultures. So it legitimizes playing the crack, gives you an advantage, so more people play the crack in secret. Right, exactly.
Yes.
I'm sure there's a ton of people playing the crack and not talking about it.
Of course.
Fields Hangout says, morals is a strong argument for those who care. I think pros who are arguing that people using the crack have an advantage tend to forget they have Capcom champions, etc. in their group chats that they can play for first to 100 when they want. So yeah, there's definitely an advantage that they have, etc., etc. This is why I said it's impossible to talk about Twitter, right? Like talk about on Twitter. This is such a
But if those people have to play in secret in order to do so, put them into secrecy, so that way they know they shouldn't be doing it.
Largely why
we should be making a stance that it is cheating, unless the community doesn't think it is cheating. Then they need to make that stance.
Because they've had access to a lot of fighting games early. Like every time a new Guilty Gear came out, they had access to a new Guilty Gear for months before US did. Like literally lead time is a huge advantage, right? Well, right, exactly. What's the excuse after the game has been out for a year though? Right. And that's my point, is that I don't think after a year it matters. The problem is there's $1 million on the line.
Exactly.
And clearly
and we don't know if there'll be another $1 million prize pool if that's the only time.
Who gets to play for those $1 million? You're absolutely right. My mindset is that in the end, the crack isn't going to matter, because after a year, hell, maybe even after 6 months, it might not matter at all.
I don't think after 3 months it will matter.
The
best players will be the best players.
Is that early on,
still a problem.
Like CEO and Evo are literally taking place less than 2 months.
Yeah.
After the game comes out.
And those can be qualifying events.
Right? Well, actually, Evo is what? 2.5 months after the game comes out. So it'll be 3 months. And yes, 3 months is a while. Like, we'll find all sorts of new stuff, but the people playing the crack will still have an advantage in about 3 months' time, I think. So there is a good chance that the Evo winner, and if Evo becomes an instant qualifier for Capcom Cup like it was last year, that's how Kawano got in. Does that mean then that they took a spot from somebody else necessarily? So again, that's the question. Normally I am right there with you that after a while,
and what happens when
it just doesn't matter anymore. Like,
what
it just
happens
doesn't make
if
a
the winner of
for me, it's just that these
CPT
first few months, and with $1 million
is a crack beta player.
See, from a person who comes from an arcade perspective, and the way that my brain works,
there's going to be enough people that are going to say that guy didn't deserve it.
Balance, et cetera, et cetera. All these issues never used to be really a concern because there's not $1 million on the line, right? Like I just came from Texas Showdown, where I commentated CVS2 and Super Turbo and Alpha 2 and all these games, and we're just having a grand old time, and we're like, retro games are hype and fun and blah blah blah. Now run a Super Turbo tournament with $1 million on the line, and let's see how many people all of a sudden start getting mad about how bad some of the characters are, or how broken Vega is in Super Turbo, or how stupid Ganajin is in Third Strike. Like, it's not gonna be just like yeah, that's the balance, but we learn how to like, things change as soon as you put that in there. I first made that realization when Chen in season 1 of Street Fighter V was playing Fong, and he just left Fong. And I was like, why? You were doing good with Fong. Fong is cool, whatever. He might not be top tier, but then I was like, wait, Chen might literally be basing his finances on whether he wins CPT events or not. What is the impetus for actually continuing to play this low tier character when so much money is on the line? Everything changes when you start putting that much money on the line. Which is, of course, an argument that some people give, that esports kind of ruins things. That's another story for another time. That is a completely different conversation. The conversation we're having right now is based in reality. The players who have access to the crack could easily win Evo, CEO, etc., and get an early jump on points in terms of CPT, which will give them the chance to win $1 million that maybe they didn't deserve. That part is an opinion, because obviously if you are using the crack and are able to win CEO or Evo, you're still pretty damn good at the fighting game. You're still pretty damn good at the fighting game, because no amount of access to the crack is going to turn an average player into someone who's going to be able to beat like 1 month IDOM. Right? It's just not gonna happen. That's just kind of, this is why it's such a gray area, because in the end it might not actually matter. In the end it might not make a difference. And the main thing is, how do we enforce it? Like, there's literally no way to enforce it.
Doesn't matter.
Right? I mean, I've even tried to think
honor
of like
system.
some clever
Everyone
ways
should
to
be
like
agreeing to it. It's integrity.
make things confusing. Like there's just no way, right? Like, obviously,
it's almost like they, and I'm not saying he's saying this, but it's almost like an argument for why it shouldn't even exist as a
who
policy.
Have played the crack. Thank you so much.
I'm not saying that's what he's saying. I just
Guarantee
feel like that's
you
what it's
guys
coming off
nerfed
as.
Guile before the game comes out. Yes. Because Guile is not going to be able to do any of those loops that he could do before. I'm almost certain of that.
Okay. So yeah, just because you can't enforce it doesn't mean that it shouldn't exist. And I know that he's not saying that, but it feels like people are practically trying to say that without saying it, or at the very least, it definitely feels like that's kind of where the conversation is inevitably going. Like, just because we can't enforce it, it shouldn't exist. No, it does need to exist. Yeah, you can't punish people now because you can't do it retroactively, but at least you can prevent it from happening in the future by having a precedence and a policy set in place now. Lou, you're asking. I already questioned all PC players regarding the cracked beta. It's always in the back of my mind watching great matches. Does this person have the cracked beta? Yes. The fact that that question is in your mind is the problem. That's why it's so important for everyone that is participating in tournaments agree to the policies, so there's no question of whether or doubt that it's true. Of course, that question's going to come up. And of course, there's going to be a few bad apples. But if everyone agrees that it's not acceptable to do that, then we all agree that the competition is clean. Unless we're agreeing that that's okay. That's where the caveat is. Is it okay for the cracked beta to not be considered cheating? And I guarantee it, there's going to be a subdivision of people that say, yeah, that's okay. We don't think that the crack beta is cheating, like Sonic Soul, for example. But I guarantee there are plenty of people that agree that there's no way to enforce it that would feel like, no, I don't think that's okay. It should be considered cheating because it is getting a head start ahead of everyone else, regardless if everyone can get access to it. It shouldn't be done that way because it's not okayed by Capcom, and it is illegal activity, technically speaking. You know? And I don't think anyone feels comfortable with the idea of saying that people should break the law, you know? I don't think anyone feels comfortable with that idea at all. And do you know what's going to end up happening is that if the community agrees that it's not breaking it's not breaking integrity at all to do that, Capcom is likely going to say, well, we could be held accountable for that. It's not our product, or it's our product and we don't want it out. So we're not releasing it on PC anymore because we can't trust you guys anymore. Don't push your luck. Don't push it. You're literally begging Capcom to do that. So be careful what you wish for. And the fact that that question is on your mind is a big problem. But that's why integrity matters. Everyone is agreeing we did not play the cracked beta. Of course, that's not the case today, but maybe next 10 years when a new Street Fighter 7 comes out, everyone agrees to the policy. We did not play the cracked beta. Well, guess what? If it's ever found out that someone did compete and they did have access to the cracked beta, some kind of evidence comes out, do you know what happens to them? They get retroactively banned then because it applies, because you broke the rules when the rules were still in place. That's how that works. That's why these rules being put in place are so important. That's why it has a big impact 10 years down the line. It may not have an impact 1 year down the line, but has a big impact for future installments.
But basically, obviously things are going to change in the game. But, it's not enough, right? Like, this is just going to be like little minor changes. every year that we've had patch notes for Street Fighter V, that hasn't made or it hasn't made or broken any of the players of that character, unless the change was like super significant, you know. I mean, what else will we call it, Wake Up Super, besides calling it the crack?
I do think it's funny that we call it crack beta. It's hilarious.
We really don't know. The game could come out and all of a sudden the drive system is wildly different. Who knows? Who knows? But I just call it cocaine.
Okay.
I can smell Uranus from here. Oh, we've already gotten rid of that bad joke and renamed it. What do we call it now? Urectum.
Oh no. Game's got a dirty mind.
Oh man, shout outs to Futurama. But yeah, that's the thing. In the end, this is impossible to enforce. And so I really don't think that there's any way that we could enforce this anyway. So regardless of what Momochi feels at this point in time, I don't really think that there's anything we could do about it. That's
I don't agree with the permaban.
Conclusion that I come to is that
I think
I just don't
1
think
year
there's
ban
anything
is the statute limit,
in the
unless
end,
it's severe.
You know, it sucks for me to say this. I think the conversation is moot. I think the point is moot anyway. Momochi saying that he feels like the players playing the crack should be banned is just him expressing his opinion. I don't think there's anything Capcom can really do about it. So in the end, I think I don't think anything's gonna change, really. I think everything is just gonna be exactly how it is. So I know people just want to know how I feel about it. Like, honestly, I'd never cared. Because like I said, I feel like it's not gonna matter after a given amount of time. The only thing that changes everything is the $1 million on the line. And if Capcom was continuing to give out $1 million every year, which they could do, we have no idea. It depends on how successful Street Fighter 6 is. I'm sure if Street Fighter 6 actually exceeds expectations, we could get $1 million every year. If we were guaranteed $1 million every year, at this point, that would make me care even less. But if we go from $1 million back to $250,000,
that's why it should be cared more, though. It's integrity.
$120,000, like Mena won this previous year.
Do you want to work at a? Do you want to bring your money to a bank that says it has no integrity whatsoever?
Capcom may not care, but was it
allow people to rummage through your accounts?
Standpoint,
integrity is everything.
Needs to be the one to say that it's not right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's right. I mean, Japan is always woefully
I understand that since it's a video game, it's not the same level as money, but still.
To hack things, right?
Integrity is a big.
They always underestimate
word.
the hackers. As soon as they put a beta on PC, you knew exactly what was gonna happen. You knew exactly what was gonna happen, right? I don't think it's right, but my brain is also like, yeah, obviously it was going to happen. Well, the demo doesn't matter, Wake Up Super, because the demo's not going away. The demo isn't for a weekend. The demo is literally forever at this point. We're gonna have the demos on our machines. I haven't heard them saying anything about shutting the demo down. The demo is literally like all the other demos. You download the demo and you're just gonna hold on to it pretty much the entire time. So let's say if they suddenly banned a bunch of players tomorrow for playing the crack, how would you feel about it? How would I feel about it? Like, I mean, personally, like, if you sat around bragging about the fact that you were playing the crack, then, I mean, you reap what you sow. But unfortunately, like others have said, that just means there's going to be a bunch of people who have played the crack that we have no idea that have, and they're going to be able to, quote, get away with it, unquote, you know? The other characters aren't in the demo, Wake Up Super 2. If the other characters were in the demo, we'd already know. 100% Wake Up Super 2. We would have known on day one, okay? When we downloaded it, we would have known, because the size of the game would have been a big giveaway. Clearly, none of the other characters are on the demo. Yeah, and Marmon, you know, is definitely speaking, you know, from the fighting game community. I think get good and get better is valid, right? Like it's, or are you saying like that's to combat the crackers, or do you mean that the players who are playing the crack are going to be able to get good and get better, so it's a valid argument?
Now, just because someone's playing on the crack does not mean that they're going to win
sure.
CPT. It does not mean that they're going to be the best player in the world. It does not mean that they're
Right,
guaranteed
but I mean,
success.
look, again,
No
my
one
whole
is
point,
saying
Wake Up
that.
Super, is that if they were in the crack, if they were
issue
in the
at
demo,
hand
we'd
is
know
what
already.
if the winner of the CPT
When Street Fighter
is
Cross
a crack
Tekken
player.
came out,
If that happens,
we knew about
that
all the
called into
characters
question
on
the
disc
integrity
within
of the
hour
tournaments.
one. Within hour one of the game's existence, we already knew all the characters were already on the disc. Like, people are just way too fast, way too good at this now. And that's one of the things that, you know, Japan developers, I think, really need to just start understanding. You know, that these hackers out there are ridiculous out there. What if an American player finally breaks the curse at EVO by winning Street Fighter 6, but then everyone puts an asterisk on it because they were a player that had the crack? That would be sad. Yes, that would be very sad. And that's another morals argument right there, you know, from Dude McGuy, right? Like, that's just one of those things that, yes, it would suck if an American actually only won because they had that kind of advantage, right? That would suck. Right? Wouldn't we want it to have it so that the player who wins EVO as an American finally winning, you know, post Street Fighter 4 era, post Rebirth era, for all of us to feel like it was legit? Yeah, absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
And Japanese players would say that the American players didn't deserve it because they fucking cheated.
Difficult discussion.
That's what they would argue. I'm not saying that they did, or
it's a very difficult
I agree with that
discussion.
entire statement.
It's tough. It's a tough one.
I don't completely agree with the statement.
I do think that the people playing the crack are wrong just because, yes, technically that's not what anyone wanted, and it's, you know, for all intents and purposes, it's illegal, right? That's why, look, I do not have access to the crack. I can't play it even as much as I have wanted.
And why do you do that, James
so
Chen? Because you have integrity.
I want to lab
You understand
so badly.
it can get you in
Being
trouble.
a commentator for
I don't
Capcom
care for a layman.
pretty much
I don't care for an
ensure that
average
I will go
person
nowhere
who
near
gives a
the
shit.
crack, so don't
But
even worry about
competitors
that.
ought to
I
have
do
that
not
same
have
level
that.
of integrity.
I do not have access to it myself. You know, PlayStation, you can data mine it. If you download it onto a hard drive on the PlayStation, then you take the hard drive out of the PlayStation and plug it into a PC, you can data mine it. Like, people, trust me, it's not hard. It's not hard to do. Programmers are ridiculous, okay? There are very, very, very few things that you can try to do to get in the way of hackers. There's very, very little you can do to stop the hackers, honestly. So, I mean, again, I used to work for a security company, right? Norton, and we were given, you know, people would come in and talk to us about cybersecurity and stuff like that all the time. Like, it is almost impossible to stop them. It's almost impossible to stop
It
them.
is technically impossible. If a human being wants to get into something,
the guy
they will.
literally giving us the discussion told us the story of how a bank was like, you know, we want, like, these guys were hackers. You know, they're the Suicide Squad. They're the hackers turned into people you hire to see how secure your site is. And they were working with the CEO of a major bank. And the CEO said, our site is super secure. You cannot hack into it. And the guys were like, all right, give us a little bit. They left the room and they came back into the room and had a transaction with the CEO's bank account, transferring all of his money into their bank account. And all they had to do was click go. And the CEO was like, So yeah, trust me, everybody has the ability to hack all this stuff. Like, it is, as a programmer, like, this is just the way it works, right? Yeah, don't ever claim something is unhackable. You are putting a target on yourself so badly. So, man. So, That's basically, I don't think it's the right thing to do to play the hack. But in the end, as a competitor and as a person who's been in the fighting game community and everything like that, I also know that in the end, it's not going to make much of a difference. Because I guarantee you, most of the people who are playing the Street Fighter V hack, if they weren't already that good in the first place, their early success fizzled out pretty quickly, right? If they still maintained success afterwards, it probably meant they were going to have that success whether they played the crack or not. That's just kind of the mindset that I come in here. The thing that just changes everything is the $1 million and the potential that this $1 million is only a one-time thing. Like, I can't even explain to you, like, if you're a legit good player and you see this $1 million prize at the end of the road, like, someone is winning $1 million. Like, this is not gonna be a maybe someone wins $1 million, like some sort of like lotto ticket kind of thing, like you play every week and sometimes nobody wins. Like, literally at some point in time, early next year, someone is winning $1 million for playing Street Fighter 6. And because that money is on the line, that's what changes things. That's what changes, in my opinion, how Momochi is feeling about this and approaching about this, because this is a big deal. Right?
Big deal.
Right, exactly. Deal. And that's the thing, is that, to commemorate the launch, special prize. Again, if Street Fighter 6 just all of a sudden explodes like gangbusters and just gets budget and money like you can't imagine, sure enough, maybe we'll get another $1 million, and maybe it can be sustained in the future as just part of their marketing budget, or they really get to build up a real esports division like a League of Legends, like a Riot, right? Because obviously the esports department for something like Capcom is
pretty hard to obtain that dream if we're always being accused of allowing cheaters.
Without having any knowledge that it's,
since we now just ruled that it is cheating.
Esports department of Riot, for example, right? So if they could actually get to that point,
that's not me saying that's cheating. That's the CPT organizer saying it's cheating.
It matters. It matters. Having that little early start matters. Just in the short term for this $1 million. Even though I do think it is, I don't think it's gonna make a damn difference. And that's kind of how I feel. So,
okay.
Any case, I don't know if
that is all what we're going to be talking about. But yes, big controversies, fascinating topics, fascinating time in our lives revolving around Street Fighter 6 in particular, and the future of fighting games and what that means. Because, oh, and don't forget the DJ trailer. Yeah, I'll check that out real quick here. Obviously, it is controversial, but in order for us to figure out controversies like this, we have to talk about them. These are not attacks on Sonic Soul or James Chen or anyone that thinks otherwise. These are meant to, the purpose of having controversial topics is to talk about them and then make a stance. And then obviously the people making the real decisions, the CPT organizers, they're the ones that determine things. I don't make a decision on this. A layman doesn't get to make a decision on this. An average Joe player does not get to make decisions on this. We let that be decided by CPT organizers. They organize the event, they set up the rules, and the competitors agree to said rules. They have now just concluded that this is bannable. So that means it's cheating going forward, or breaking code of conduct. Either way, it's not acceptable.